Hey folks, Gway. So yeah, I'm living in my van down by the river. I don't know if anybody gets that Saturday Night Live quote, but we'll see. I'm traveling a little bit this week. I'm up in Fredericton helping my son with a couple of projects around his house, and thought I would do this video because I talked about this before, but I wasn't really happy with the way it went, and I thought I would take another kick at the can. There's a falfit out there by the name of Kenneth Copeland. Kenneth Copeland, prosperity gospel kind of guy, talks about how blessed he is because of the number of jets he owns, and he does own more than one. He actually, I believe, he owns an airport. He owns a small airport where he keeps his jets and flies them out of. A very incredibly wealthy guy, often brags about his wealth with his buddies. He and his other falfit brothers will get together and they'll talk about how God is blessing them and how God is so good to them because of the faith that they have, and then they'll quickly turn around and ask their congregation for an extra $1 million for this or that. I don't have a whole lot of respect for the guy. I'm sorry about that. I think him owning the title of pastor is, well, I think it does a disservice to all the real pastors that are out there. Anyhow, the reason I'm bringing him up is that he's sort of taken on the mega approach to Christianity. There's lots of money to be made, right? Lots of money to be made in negativity. Lots of money to be made in the mega movement of Christians, in the Christian nationalist. In the Christian nationalist movement, there's a ton of cash out there. It seems like these folks are willing to dish out all kinds of cash if you're preaching the gospel from that particular perspective. And so he, being a smart man, he jumped on board. So he's been talking a lot about U.S. history. He's been talking a lot about his understanding of U.S. history. He's been talking a lot about how, the United States was a Christian nation. He's been talking a lot about the founding fathers and what they had in mind. And George Washington's one of his favorite guys. So recently, actually, it's recent that he did this, but he started doing it last year. He was talking about George Washington. He had a beautiful narrative. It really is. He paints a beautiful picture of George Washington. And that first day, as president, first day that Congress sits, he says Congress, the very first act of Congress is they declared the United States to be a Christian nation. Not true. The very first act of Congress is well established. You can read it in the history books. It's kind of interesting. But with George, he paints this beautiful picture. With President Washington, he paints this beautiful picture. He says, George Washington dropped to his knees, and he kissed the Bible on Genesis chapter 17. And he declared that we will be your people and you will be our God. And it really is a beautiful picture. If you think about it from a romantic, cinematic viewpoint, if you have that kind of, if your main character, if your hero has that kind of moment, it's powerful. It's gorgeous. The problem is there's no evidence that it happened. There's no evidence that it happened. See, history, when you teach history, there's room for your imagination. There's room for your imagination. You can imagine how people might respond to this or that, and you can share that. I wonder if this is what might have happened. I wonder if this is how they might have felt. I wonder if that he may have dropped to his knees in prayer. I wonder that. That's one thing. To say this happened is a completely different thing. When we make historical declarations, we have to have evidence to back it up. We have to say, well, this is what's written. This is what the journals say. This is what his contemporaries say. This is what the newspapers say. This is what, his political adversaries say. There's all kinds of different sources for us to glean historical fact. And when we teach history, we teach from that. We teach from the evidence. We teach from archaeological stuff. It is we can only teach what we can prove. Everything else is a matter of opinion. Everything else is a matter of assumption. Everything else is a matter of presumption. Everything else is a matter of bias, questions, imagination, wonder. Again, those things are all okay. But the audience, the people we're teaching, the people we're speaking to need to know this is what we think as opposed to this is the evidence we have. The reason it bothers me that he's doing this, I'm not a historian. I love history, but I would never claim to be a historian. The reason it bothers me that he's doing these kinds of things, and people like him are doing these kinds of things by making these bold, well, the founding fathers thought that this should be a Christian nation, despite the fact that we actually have lots of evidence, where these founding fathers, they were really, really, really aware of the danger of mixing politics and religion, and they wanted nothing to do with it, and they wanted to make sure that it didn't actually happen. Despite all that, the founding fathers wanted this. And just as a little bit of a historical footnote, of the 13 colonies, many of them, the state church, it's my guys, Church of England, right? So, historically speaking, if you want to go back to where the founding fathers came from, it was the Church of England all the way, baby. Anyhow, back to Kenny. As a pastor, as a priest, as a minister, as a representative of God, of Jesus Christ, as a teacher, I'm teaching about things that I cannot prove. I'm teaching about things that are beyond my ability to prove. Sure, it's in the Bible, absolutely, but that's not proof. Really, at the end of the day, when somebody comes to me and says, "Yeah, you just believe in an invisible man in the sky," can you prove to me that God is real? Only in my experience, only in my rationale, only with my faith. But I can't offer you evidence that, yes, I can, and here's God's journal. Yes, I can, and here's how God has been cited using the latest scientific methods. Yes, I can, and here's how God was cited by historical figures and how God was present en masse with, I can't prove the existence of God. I teach about faith. I teach from the perspective of faith. I teach about something that I have no evidence, no physical evidence of. And so when a person like Kenneth Copeland and his ilk begin teaching history, and they're teaching from their perspective, they're teaching from their wishes, they're teaching from their dreams, they're teaching from their delusion, and those things it's easily proven that he is not telling the truth, that these stories aren't based on evidence, right? When it's easily proven that he's going beyond what the history books tell us, how then can he be trusted? How then can we be trusted with the spiritual, right? If he's going to lie about something that can be researched, how can he be trusted with spiritual information? There's a passage in the Gospel of Luke in the 16th chapter. Jesus says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? Now, as I read this passage, I thought, well, the worldly wealth is historical, right? It's the history. It's things that we can research, and it's things that we can find evidence of, or we can find evidence to dispute a fact. It's easy. It's available to us, and not for nothing, but the internet makes it so even easier, right? The internet our search engines makes it so much easier to just Here's what that's what it really says? Wow. All the evidence is there. It's all available at the fingertips of every person almost every person on the planet. If we can't be trusted with those kinds of things, how can we possibly be trusted with true riches, with the knowledge of God, with theology? How can we be trusted as teachers of faith, preachers, and pastors? If I'm going to lie to you about something that you can look up, you can't possibly trust me with things that you can't look up. You can't possibly trust me with spiritual knowledge. For Christian leaders, teachers, pastors, priests, ministers, preachers, apologists, at the end of the day, it all boils down to faith. All of it boils down to faith. And if you are a person who has proven that you can't be trusted with simple things, and history by no means is history simple, but it's searchable. It's almost tactile. You can almost touch it, right? You can almost touch it. It's so close to us and so readily available to us, and so like with a guy like George Washington, so abundant. If you can't be trusted with that, how is it possible you could possibly be trusted with the spiritual things? We've got to be beyond reproach when it comes to the little, to the worldly things. We have got to be beyond reproach. We've got to rise above all doubt. And even if you do, you're still going to be doubted. But we have to do our best to rise above, to ensure that people can't find fault with us. Because if they do, that will take away all credibility. We've got to rise above if we're going to be effective teachers. If we're going to lead people to Christ, if we're going to lead people to God, if we're going to encourage people to sacrifice and to offer themselves, offer what they have for the benefits of the people around them, our credibility is so essential. It's so precious, right? It is so precious when we offer the world our hope of how history unfolded. And that hope isn't found in any kind of research, any kind of evidential information, any kind of, any kind of historical fact. Sure, you can't tell me that, I can't tell you for certain that Kenneth Copeland is lying, but also you can't tell me that what he is offering can be found anywhere. He can't prove that that's what happened. It may have happened. Sure, it may have happened, but it can't be proven that it happened. And that's the thing. Because it can't be proven, everything he says now can be called into question. If I were to tell you that Kenneth Copeland actually is a 6'3", blonde-haired, blue-eyed surfer from San Diego, California, and he only does this on the side, and he wears a wig, and he dresses, I can't prove it. Right? I can't prove it, and you can prove to me, well, based on all the evidence, Ed, he's not a 6'3", blonde-haired, blue-eyed surfer from San Diego, California. He's something else. Now, everything that I say can be called into question. Everything that I offer can be called into question. My God, we have to be so careful. As Christians, we have to be so careful with our integrity. We have to be so careful with our credibility. It's easily one of the most precious commodities we have. Again, if people can't trust you on the little things, they certainly can't trust you on the big ones. If they can't trust you about historical facts concerning George Washington, they certainly can't trust you about the nature of God. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that all of us who seek to teach, to lead people to God, to lead people in love, to lead people towards a better, brighter, more perfect future, lead people towards creating healthier, vibrant communities, that all of us would see our most precious commodity, our credibility, that it would be treated as something that is even more precious than gold, more precious than money, more precious than jets. Amen. Nemultus.